Hello, and thanks for joining my presentation today. My name is Rob Steffen, and I'm an Associate Professor of Practice in the Department of Religious Studies and Classics at the University of Arizona. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So turn down the lights, fire up the projector, and let's get going. Now, my talk today will take you through my recent redesign of Classics 160B1, Meet the Ancients, Gateway to Greece and Rome, which is a lower-level general education course focused on the history and culture of classical antiquity. The course ran in the fall of 2021 as a fully online asynchronous course. Now, the goal of this redesign was to improve student engagement in and enjoyment of the course, and to improve student learning outcomes, which focus on obtaining factual knowledge, leveraging diverse evidence in support of an argument, and critically examining ancient texts and material culture. And to achieve these goals, I developed an alternative assignment sequence, giving students the opportunity to choose between two options. One, a traditional written response to the readings, and the other, a written response to a combination of video game exploration and traditional readings. Now, the first and original assignment sequence was a series of traditional reading responses. Students would listen to online lectures, read excerpts from ancient Greek and Latin texts, in translation of course, and respond to a prompt in written form. An example of one of these questions from my first module might be something like this. Begin by reading Hesiod's Theogony, which tells the story of the ancient Greek gods. Then write your own origin story, mimicking Hesiod's epic style. Finally, write an analysis that explains how your own origin story and style mimic those of Hesiod. Support your analysis with specific evidence from the text. The newly designed assignment sequence gave the students the opportunity to address similar questions in written form, but do so using both texts and video game exploration as the basis for the response. As with the traditional assignment sequence, students would read excerpts from an ancient text. Now, however, they would also explore some part of the natural and cultural virtual landscape of ancient Greece within Ubisoft's blockbuster game, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. An example of an assignment prompt for this video game-based assignment sequence might be something like this here. So first read Pausanias' description of the Sacred Way and Temple of Apollo at the site of Delphi. Then in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, journey to the site of Delphi in the region of Phocis. As you wander up the road, pay special attention to the types of monuments you see along the way, and start thinking about why the site is set up the way that it is. Now describe the experience of a visitor to Delphi based on your reading of Pausanias and your experience in the game. What might a visitor see along the way up to the temple? What types of messages are being conveyed by the monuments along the way? Then go ahead and support your analysis with at least 3 references to the sources, some from the game, at least 2 of which are from the text. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the actual game to get a sense for the experience that students would have as they virtually explored the landscape of ancient Greece. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was created by the developer Ubisoft and released in 2018. It's an action role-playing game where you play as a man or woman caught in the middle of the Peloponnesian War, as Athens and Sparta battle for dominance of Greece. The gameplay, in large part, involves completing a series of quests, both battles and puzzles. And as you explore the landscape of ancient Greece, from Athens to the Peloponnese to the islands and beyond, you engage in these sorts of activities. Within the first year and a half of the release of the game, it had sold more than 10 million copies worldwide and is now available on all the major gaming systems as well as PC and Mac. Now, the game itself is known for its vast, vibrant, natural, and built landscape. But in the normal gameplay, the landscape is littered with a variety of foes who try to impede your progress and who you have to fight. But Ubisoft's development of the Discovery Tour mode gives the player the opportunity to virtually explore the entire landscape without any of the violence that normally accompanies the game. So let's go ahead and jump back into the site of Delphi to get a sense for how this works. So go ahead, you can pick up your controllers. So first, we've got the description of the site from the ancient Greek author and traveler Pausanias, and he begins his description. When you enter the city, you see the temples in a row, the first of which was in ruins, and on to the next, which had neither images nor statues, and the third had statues of a few Roman emperors. The fourth is called the Temple of Athena Forethought, the votive offering of the Massiliates in bronze. The gold shield given to Athena Forethought by Croesus the Lydian was said by the Delphians to have been stolen by Philothemus. Near the sanctuary of Forethought is the precinct of the hero Phylacus. And as you can see, as we walk up the sacred way here, right, we get a similar set of statues and shrines and monuments and temples. And these are the sorts of comparisons kind of between text and game that the students would make as they write up their response. Other assignments take the students to the Athenian Acropolis, the site of the world-famous Doric temple of Athena Parthenos, right, better known as the Parthenon. It also takes them to the Ionic temple of Athena Nike. But rather than summarizing via lecture or textbook descriptions of the Greek architectural orders, students doing this sequence would climb up and around the temples, taking notes on the similarities, right, things like columns and pediments, and the difference, things like capitals and decoration, as they go through the exploration process. And it's only after writing up their experience and conclusions from the game that students go on to read traditional textbook depictions and descriptions of Greek architecture and compare their conclusions to those of scholars in the field. Finally, let's go ahead and take a look at the urban fabric of Athens itself. The game does a great job of fleshing out the city with artisans and merchants and people going about their daily life. In one of the assignments, students brainstorm what they'd expect to see people doing in an ancient city, right? Farming or trading or whatever. And then they would note what activities they actually see the non-playable characters engaged in, right? Everything from ceramics to construction, like you see here, to sculpting, to hawking their wares in the agora. Students then choose one of those activities as a topic for further individual research, using both primary and secondary sources to better understand the topic. Okay, so now that you've got a sense for the game, the virtual landscape of ancient Greece, and the assignments that linked everything together, let's talk a little bit about the study itself. The goal of this was to get student feedback regarding engagement, enjoyment, and learning from both sides of the aisle. And what I mean by that is both from students who decided to complete the video game assignment sequence and from students who chose to complete the traditional reading response assignment sequence. Comparing the responses between the two assignment sequences within a single course and based on similar content is meant to help isolate the impact of the video game experience on the students' learning process. To garner this feedback, students were sent an IRB-approved survey after the completion of the course. Now, out of the 266 students enrolled in the course, only 26 students responded to the survey. Luckily, these were relatively evenly split between students who completed the video game assignment sequence, with 14 of the responses coming from students who did that video game sequence, and 12 of the responses coming from students who did the traditional reading response sequence. The survey included yes-no questions, things like, do you play video games outside of class? Likert scale questions like, how much did you enjoy the assignments that you undertook? And open-ended questions like, what from the assignments contributed to your learning? Now, the first thing that emerges from the data is that my students appear to have kind of self-selected based on their previous gaming experiences. So 13 out of 14 students, or 93%, who opted for the video game assignment sequence, noted that they played video games outside of class, while only 7 of the 12 students, or 58%, who opted for the traditional reading response sequence, noted that they played video games for fun. And it wasn't just kind of a yes-no difference here. So out of those who do play video games for fun, the students who chose the video game assignment sequence play almost 3 hours more per week than those who chose the traditional reading response sequence. These differences were evident in previous Assassin's Creed experience as well. So 57% of the people who chose the video game sequence had played at least one Assassin's Creed game before, and over a third of them, 36%, had played Odyssey in particular. Now, out of those for the reading responses, only a single person had played an Assassin's Creed game, and no one had actually played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So it may be useful to keep in mind that, at least in this study, students who have significant experience gaming seem to find these sorts of assignments more appealing than those with less experience. And that building familiarity with the game may be a useful strategy to get students buy-in for video game-based assignments. Now, in terms of enjoyment, those who chose the video game-based assignment sequence reported substantially higher scores than those who chose the traditional reading response assignment sequence, with average scores of 9.1 for people who chose the video games and an average score of 6.8 on a 10-point scale for those who chose the reading responses. Now, I don't have any other data to compare this to, right? But having more than 2 full points of difference on a 10-point scale, it feels kind of like a dramatic difference here. It would be useful in the future, however, to try other types of assignments, right? Creative and artistic and reflective and written and oral and video, to get a sense for the kind of range that these average scores might see when they all compare to each other. What we can see here is that students who opted for the video game-based sequence also felt as though they learned more. They rated their level of learning as a 9.1 out of 10, whereas the reading response group rated their learning as a 7.7 out of 10. Moreover, all respondents on the video game sequence noted that they felt like they learned more than if they had completed the reading response sequence, whereas only 2/3 of the reading response sequence respondents felt like they learned more than the video game sequence. Now, it's important to note here that what we're looking at are student perceptions of their own learning, not actual differences in the achievement of learning outcomes. That would, however, be a useful next step in this sort of study to determine the way in which, kind of various learning technologies differentially impact the achievement of student learning outcomes. In terms of what it actually was about the video game-based assignments that made the sequence both enjoyable and seemingly conducive to learning, the students noted a variety of different aspects in their qualitative free response answers. The most frequent topic of comment was the visual nature of the video game assignments. So 5 out of 9 of the responses to what worked particularly well highlighted being able to actually see the landscape and architecture of ancient Greece. So one student noted, I think that the ability for us as students to explore the ancient world worked really well for the assignments. Actually seeing the different ruins and temples in the game really helped with the learning about the ancient world. While another student over here noted, the way that the game was set up allowed me to be fully engaged, and for once, learning history was not boring, and seeing actual representations of Greece allowed me to retain the information even more. The Discovery Tour mode was very useful, which allowed me to just learn and explore. The other prominent common thread to the positive comments about the video game sequence centered on interactivity. So 3 out of the 9 responses noted that interactivity that the students experienced in the assignments was something that helped them, learn and enjoy. One student noted, I felt as if I retained the information learned throughout the assignments more than what I would have traditionally with just a textbook reading. The video game assignment allowed me to get more interactive, and I've always found that to help more than anything when learning something new. It was a breath of fresh air for the semester. And another student echoed those thoughts. I enjoyed the fact that it was different and more interactive than any other class I've done. Other positive comments noted the sense of immersion, creativity, and narration of the video game assignments. The students who completed the video game sequence also provided feedback on what they thought could be improved. These suggestions varied more widely than the positive comments, but several of the students requested more information on locating where they needed to go in the game in order to complete the specific assignments. That is, more detailed directions might be necessary than page or chapter numbers that you might give for a traditional reading question. Another issue with the assignment was the sense of alignment with the course. So the first half of the course aligned really well with the video game content since it's centered on ancient Greece. The second half of the course migrates to Rome, however, which is less aligned with the game. And I tried to deal with this by having students kind of create their own video game-based assignment, but still this disjuncture seemed to stick out. Other comments on difficulty centered on technology, right? The laptop they borrowed from the library lagged horribly, and their desire to spend more time creating their own adventure would have been useful rather than following somebody else's assignment sequence. Initial conclusions from this study, then, seem promising. In terms of both enjoyment and self-perceptions of learning, the students who opted for the video game sequence reported higher quantitative scores than students who chose the traditional reading response assignment sequence. And it seems as though the visuality and interactivity of these assignments were driving forces in what made them positive experiences for students. Perhaps this shouldn't be surprising. In a discipline centered on fragmentary text and archaeological ruins, the ability to visualize and experience a fleshed out landscape does seem particularly appealing. I was also honestly surprised by the lack of technical and technological difficulties experienced by the students who undertook the video game assignment. There were some issues finding the right place to go and some laptop issues, but overall, there were very few comments about the technical aspect, and also surprisingly few emails from students throughout the course asking how to accomplish the different assignments. This, of course, is just a preliminary study. The sample sizes are small, and it only ran in one course. Beyond expanding the scale of the study, one of the next steps would be to test the impact of this technology on the achievement of actual learning outcomes, rather than just on student perceptions of learning. And there are differences, are there differences in the way that students who chose one sequence over the other perform when it comes to tests or papers or projects. Moreover, it would be useful to test the degree to which games centered on other topics impacted the results. Are we getting something that's specific to ancient Greece or Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Or does the integration of any gaming into course design produce similar results? And finally, going back to the self-selection issue at the beginning of this lecture, it'd be useful to take a deeper dive into the role of gaming for students who have little or no prior gaming experience. So, there is certainly room for far more robust research on this topic. The preliminary results from this study, however, suggest that integrating gaming into the history classroom has the potential to dramatically impact students' perceptions of both enjoyment and learning in the course material. So thank you so much. Now go out there and start playing. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for paying attention today.